It's Ben here. I am back again today doing another video. The subject of today's video is going to be a lesser talked about NBA player than people are used to, a guy who many people may not be familiar with. Many people may remember him as just a shell of an NBA player and a guy who just does nothing but rides the bench. But either way, however you know him, today we are going to be discussing Joe Smith. If you're unfamiliar with Joe Smith, he's an NBA power forward who was drafted first overall in 1995. And basically today I am just going to be going over why I think he is the quietest bust of all time in NBA history. So as a bit of background, if you're not familiar with what a draft bust is for some reason, a bust is basically a player who is expected to perform very well at the NBA level, is likely drafted very high, and doesn't live up to the expectations. Now this could be because of injuries for somebody like Greg Oden, who most people would agree had a lot of talent, but basically wasn't a great player because he was perpetually injured and just never could remain healthy and play many games. Or you have a different kind of bust, which would be somebody like Anthony Bennett or Kwame Brown, who are just players that just didn't have a skill set that translated to the NBA or just weren't good enough to cut it in the NBA. Other examples of this could be Derek Williams or Hashim Thabit or Joe Smith, who I'm going to be getting into today. So to clarify, Joe Smith is a bust not because he was very injured and missed a lot of time. Joe Smith is a bust because he just didn't have enough talent, or his talent really just didn't translate well to the NBA, and he wasn't good enough to cut it in the league. So just reviewing, he was drafted first overall in 1995. A few other notable players who were drafted after him were Antonio McDyess, drafted second overall, who was selected for an All-Star game and an All-NBA team. Jerry Stackhouse, who was a two-time All-Star, was drafted third. Rasheed Wallace was a four-time All-Star and drafted fourth. Kevin Garnett was a 15-time All-Star, Hall of Famer. He was drafted fifth. Bryant Reeves was drafted sixth, who, although he had a very short NBA career, he was very effective in those years. Other notable players who were drafted after him include Damon Stoudemire, who was always good for about 15 points a night. Others include Theo Ratliff, who was a one-time All-Star and a pretty decent contributor for Philadelphia in the late 90s for a few years. And then rounding it out as a notable guy selected after him was Michael Finley, who was selected by the Suns at 21 and turned into a really good player for a few different teams, the Suns, the Mavericks, the Spurs for a little while. So you had Joe Smith, though, was the guy that people wanted first overall, and that's really interesting when you look back and consider he was a power forward, and in the top 5 of the NBA draft this year, there were 4 out of the 5 picks were power forwards. McDyess, Rasheed Wallace, and Kevin Garnett were also all power forwards. At least that's how they were drafted, is to play that position. So today I'm basically going to run through his stats, the teams he played for, and why he might have failed. So in his rookie season, he played all 82 games, 34 minutes a night. He started every game. He played for the Warriors, who had drafted him number 1 overall. He averaged 15 points and 9 rebounds a game, along with 1 assist, 1 steal, 2 blocks per game. He shot 46% from the field on about 12 shots a night, and he shot 36% from 3, yet he was only taking a 0.3 3-point attempts per game. From the free throw line, he shot 77%, so pretty average. And so yeah, that's a pretty good picture. He was a very good rookie. I think if I am correct, he made the All-NBA rookie team. And so he was promising at first. I think a good comparison for him would be like Marvin Bagley. Like, picture what Marvin Bagley was this year, and that's what Joe Smith was. So in his second season in Golden State, he again performed very well. He played 39 minutes this season, up from 34. He started 80 games and played in 80 games. He took 16 shots a night, up from 12. Shot 45% from the field, 26% from 3. Let's see here. He also shot 81% from the free throw line. He had 9 rebounds a night. Let's see here. 9 rebounds a night, 2 steals a game, or 1 steal a game, 2 assists a game, 1 block, and 19 points. So basically, 19 and 9 was what he was good for on a nightly basis his sophomore season, which is pretty good. Now going into his next year, he had a pretty mixed season. He started off really good in Golden State during the first half of the year. He started every game. He put up similar numbers. He was shooting 43% from the field. He was getting 17 points per night, along with 7 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block. But then they traded him midseason to Philadelphia, where he actually became a backup and did not start. Uh, Mainly just because they had guys who could start at power forward and they didn't really need him. But he was supposed to be a strong bench piece, and he went from averaging 17 and 7 down to averaging 10 and 4 off the bench in 23 minutes a night. He did increase his shooting up from 43 to 45% though, and so that is the one bright side of that. Then he went to Minnesota, where he was decent. In his first season in Minnesota, he averaged 14 and 8. He stayed there for another season in which he averaged 10 and 6. So again, not great, but also he was taking many fewer shots per night because KG was taking a lot of shots along with Stefan. Well, actually, Stefan Marbury wasn't there at this point. It was more of Wally Zerbiak being the second option. But he was only taking 8 shots per night and shooting 46%. So if you're not catching a trend for a power forward who takes most of his shots from down low, those percentages are not great whatsoever. So after his second season in Minnesota, he went to Detroit where he averaged 12 points and 7 rebounds a night, shooting only 40% from the field. Then he went back to Minnesota wherein he shot one of the best field goal percentages of his career, shooting 51% from the field, averaging 11 and 6. And he played one more season in Minnesota where he averaged 8 points a game and 5 rebounds. Again, just sort of becoming a complementary piece and not a leading man whatsoever on an NBA team. Then he went to Milwaukee, where in back-to-back seasons he put up 11 points a night. The first season averaging 9 rebounds, the second averaging 7, and then his last season in Milwaukee he only played half the season and he averaged 9 and 5. Now going to his next season is when he started to decline a bit. He went to Denver and Philly, split the season in between those two places. Over the season, he averaged 9 points and 6 rebounds a night. Then, in what I would consider his last successful season, 2007 to 2008, he played for Chicago and Cleveland. He split his time in between. He averaged 10 points and 5 rebounds a night, starting some games for Chicago and coming off the bench primarily for Cleveland. And after that season, basically the rest of his career, he was just like a backup who barely saw any minutes. But so as you'll see, basically his first couple seasons in Golden State, he averages around 17 points per game, along with around 8 to 9 rebounds. But then after that, it's a lot of like years where he's averaging between 10 to 13 points per night, and then after that, eventually it's more like 8 points per night for the like 6 to 8 points per night for the last chunk of his career. And what I've really seen is that when he was on Golden State, he was never an efficient player, even when he was like the focus of an offense. Like um, in 1996 to 97, his best season in Golden State, where he averaged 19 points per night, uh, he's just not very efficient, only shooting 45% from the field. Um, he's not taking as many shots from up close as he should. He's only taking 32% of his shots from um, 0 to 3 feet. Along with that, he's only taking 20% of his shots from 3 to 10 feet, whereas he from between 16 feet to the 3 point line, that was 31% of his shots. And from that range, he did shoot 42%, but he would have been much better served to have just shot from 0 to 3 feet, where he was 66%. So he would have been more of a catch and shoot player, but I definitely think he would have been a lot better. I think something that he ran into that a lot of guys run into is the whole idea of in college, let's say you're 6'10 or 6'11, you're basically the biggest guy on the court and you can kind of have your way with people and just do your own thing physically. But he ran into basically in the NBA, he was actually a small guy for a power forward at the time, in which guys like Garnett, Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, Chris Webber, those were the dudes. Those were the 4 guys that he was having to regularly go up against being in the Western Conference. And they were all bigger than him and they were all more skilled than him, and he kind of had this basic skill set of just like post up or like pick and roll, receive the pass and shoot jumpers from 16 feet. Oh, also don't forget Karl Malone. He had to go up against regularly too, and Charles Barkley for a little while. But his game was just kind of basic, and he had this athleticism that kind of carried him through college, wherein the competition wasn't as intense. But his athleticism was somewhat exceptional in college, but then when he gets to the NBA, it's just average. So that's how you get a guy who goes from being the number one overall pick to being a guy who is more in line with, for his career, averaging only 11 points per game. He just he relied on a little bit of his athleticism in college, and moves that seemed like really good in college were just kind of like average in the NBA. So he was never able to take over games the way he was in college. And so I think, in conclusion, to basically wrap up why this guy was a bust in the NBA, it's basically a mix of his body not being as good, and that he didn't have any physical advantages in the NBA, and then also he kind of had like a basic skill set and a basic plethora of moves that weren't that inventive or good when he got to the NBA. And so I think the final question here would be: is a guy a bust if he has a season where he averages 15 and 9, a follow-up season where he averages 19 and 9, and then his last like impressive season he averaged 15 and 6, and then 14 and 8. Those were the best 4 years of his career. And I would say, despite those being four decent seasons, he peaked in his sophomore year of the NBA. And for that reason, and his peak wasn't even an all-star caliber player. For those reasons, I can call him a bust and sleep good at night. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it informative and interesting. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.